I've never seen known a show like Breaking Bad to create so much fan discussion. Especially at this point, some of the theories about the show's endgame that we've been incessantly reading have been things like this idea of the Hamlet theory, like there's something rotten in Albuquerque, that there's lots of parallels to Shakespeare's Hamlet. Oh, wow. This hunter-gatherer theory that Walter takes on aspects of the people that he's gone through, all these different ideas that people are playing on. Do you pay any attention to these series, or are you deliberately placing red herrings so people like us are just scratching our heads constantly trying to figure it out?
We don't really, we never, when we were up and running, we never really had much time to place deliberate red herrings. We were at our maximum capacity, just trying to tell an interesting and dramatic and satisfying tale. And I personally, I've got a bit of a phobia about the internet, or rather about looking myself up on the internet. So I never have actually Googled myself, nor the show.
Oh, well done.
You know what it is?
It's quite an achievement.
Well, thank you. It was a little hard at the beginning of it all. Now it's actually very easy. Now I'm actually phobic about doing it. And it's not because I'm not interested in the fans or what they have to say. Rather, it's because I know I would be too interested, and I would be trapped for hours on end, reading every comment, poring over it in a very neurotic fashion.
Much like we do.
Well, I just realized early on that it was in my best interest, mental health wise, and in the best interest of the show, to basically keep our writers' room somewhat hermetically sealed, and so that we would please ourselves. Having said that, people do tell me reactions that the fans have online, sometimes whether I ask for them or not, and they'll tell me, oh, people really don't like Skyler, or this or that or the other, or that hunter-gatherer theory, which I think is a very interesting one. I've heard that one, and I think there is some truth to that, specifically with Gustavo Fring. I think we purposefully made some parallels, as if Walt was taking on some of Gus's attributes after he...
The towel under the toilet, that kind of thing.
That was very much on purpose. That was in the script, that hand towel. And obviously that's something Walt couldn't have known about because he wasn't there to witness it. But we wanted the resonance of that moment. We wanted the audience to say, I've seen this before. Yeah. Very much on purpose, yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, just speaking quite personally, what happened with Mike at the end of season 5A was probably one of my favorite and most emotional moments I've ever seen on television ever. Wow. I've rewatched that so many times. Wow. Without giving too much away, just how high the stakes were emotionally and story-wise. Have we got anything coming up to rival that scene, that level of emotion? Anything coming down the pipe?
We are leaving it all on the field, as they say, in these final 8 episodes. There are it is quite an emotional and dramatic roller coaster in these final 8, and there are some big moments to come. I will not even hint at what they may be, but Mike's death, that was a tough one for us too. It was interestingly, the crew, all of whom loved Jonathan Banks, who plays Mike. They passed out black armbands that they all wore the day that Mike was shot on camera.
That's fantastic.
And Jonathan Banks, who plays a tough, grizzled, scary guy, is really at heart is just a big marshmallow. He's just a big softy. And he was crying. He had tears flowing. The makeup lady and she was crying too. Everybody was crying. It was a very sad day. But we dramatically, as sad as it was, we knew it was the right way to go to help tell Walter White's story and his continued decline as a human being.
Fantastic. Over the course of the 5 seasons, we've seen Walter do some pretty horrific things, like you say, like with Mike being one of the latest, like letting Jesse's girlfriend Jane choke to death, and poisoning Brock with Lily of the Valley and all that. I mean, there's hundreds. I mean, we'd be talking about it for hours.
He's a bad guy.
Was that what struck our mind was there ever a time you've written an act for Walter, something like one of these top 10 most villainous things, where either you yourselves as the writers or as the showrunner or AMC have gone, whoa, That's too much. We've got to pull it back a little bit. Did that ever happen at all?
It came close to happening only one time. AMC and Sony were very courageous with this show. I was afraid they would not be, because my experience in Hollywood has been that a company will tell you they love what you want to do, they love your script, and then they'll try to soften it. That was never the case with Sony nor AMC, and I'm very proud to be able to say that. The one time people got a little nervous was when Jane died. And I got to tell you, my original pitch to my writers, the original pitch I had never even made it to AMC or Sony. My original pitch was that Walt showed up and purposefully gave Jane a second dose of heroin and killed her on purpose. And my 6 writers, and I always like to say it was kind of a benign dictatorship in the writers' room. I guess I could have outvoted them or vetoed them, but they all looked at me like they said, "What is wrong with you?" And
I'm not sure if I'm happy or glad that you did or not.
You know, I was at an event here in Berlin yesterday, and the moderator had a very excellent point that I'd never thought of before. I told this some version of this story, and he said, "You know what? I think it's more disturbing that she chokes on her own, but that he just stands by and does nothing." He says, "Oddly enough, I think that is more disturbing than if he had come in and put on the black leather gloves," and because we've seen those kind of moments of nefarious intent before, but actually watching this beautiful young woman choked to death.
When have you seen that?
Yeah, and it's a very horrible thing to witness. And he stands there and he cries. And I was there for the shooting of that. The performance Bryan Cranston gave just towers over. It's fantastic. It was so amazing to see in person. The camera didn't quite pick up all the nuances. The motion picture camera didn't quite pick up all the nuances I was seeing through my own eyes, standing 8 feet away from him behind the camera when that was happening. And the director who directed that episode did a marvelous job. A Brit named Colin Buxey did a marvelous job. But my original intention was even darker, although I think it wound up being even more disturbing for being the way we played it. The
sort of cold apathy as opposed to, nasty killer kind of thing.
Well, it's funny because he's really not apathetic in the moment. He tears up, he cries, but then he mans up and you see this resolve cloud over his face, and his face hardens. Yeah. And you're thinking, this is a guy who will do anything to promote his interests.
Okay, yeah, and you mentioned Skyler. Mm-hmm. And also, I don't know if you managed to catch this article that Anna Gunn wrote in the
New York Times.
In the New York Times, yeah, we were reading that yesterday with great interest.
Yeah.
She doesn't lay down. She doesn't do Walt's bidding, and she's very much his equal. And she receives what I think is quite an unfair criticism. The actress and the character, and hatred from selection of the fans. But are you surprised at the abuse that Skyler and then by extension Anna Gunn gets for the role, or does it sort of come with the territory a little bit, or what are your thoughts on the whole thing surrounding this?
Well, I think people speak with great passion with the anonymity that the internet provides. I think certain people speak with great passion, more than I think they come across sometimes in a way that I don't even think they intend. I think, in other words, there are people who have said on the internet, "I wish I could kill Anna Gunn," which is very scary. But I don't think they're necessarily pathological people. I think these are people who, I would hope, once they realize that words like that really trouble and disturb the actress who was simply hired by me to play this part. She doesn't write the words. She says them, and she says them very wonderfully. But people should blame me as much as anyone for not liking Skyler, because it's the way my writers and I write her. But I think most people who would say such things on the internet, they don't really mean anything hurtful by it. And I think if they came face to face with Anna, they would realize she's a real human being and deserves not to be scared, to go out. She's just playing a role. She's just an actress playing a role. I think they would realize, gee, I might have overstated my emotions here a bit. I need to pull it back from the edge here a bit. But I didn't realize, I feel a great amount of sympathy towards Skyler. Oddly enough, I've lost a little sympathy toward the character the more she has allowed herself And again, I'm talking about the character, not the actress.
Yeah.
I've felt a little less sympathy, a little reduced sympathy toward the character as she has allowed herself to be further and further co-opted by her husband. But I think she is the character who cares more about her family than Walt does. Walt always gives lip service to the idea that I do what I do for my family. I'm a good provider, and I sacrifice for the family. You know, a very reasonable argument is to be made for the idea that Walt does what he does for himself. That he's very selfish. He feels good when he makes money and makes drug deals. And Skyler says at one point, someone needs to protect this family from the man who protects this family. And she's right. She's right on the money. And so I guess historically over the years it has surprised me a bit that people tend to have less sympathy or empathy for her plight. But you know, it's a tricky thing. I don't chalk it all up to sexism. Some of it may be, but I don't. I think different parts of the audience have different reasons for not liking Skyler, and I think one big reason may be that we have a hard time associating, or rather, we have a hard time feeling empathy for characters who are essentially powerless. I mean, Skyler, essentially, she's a powerful character who finds herself nonetheless in a box. She can't call the police on her husband, even though she knows intellectually it's the right thing to do, because it would hurt her family and her children too much. And yet she knows that allowing him to continue doing this is also terrible for the family. She's really in an absolutely untenable situation. And we don't like to picture ourselves in a box. And therefore, maybe we don't like to picture characters. We don't like to feel, we detach ourselves from characters who are thus in a box. It's a bad place to find oneself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.